me. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters. Fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse, and welcome to my final episode of the year. Today, I'm doing something a little different. I've pulled together the most listened to, AI-focused conversations of 2025. And y'all, when I laid these episodes side by side, a story emerged. 2025 was the year AI changed how students search, how marketers work, and how campuses respond. In the day-to-day decisions we make, the content we publish, the tools we choose, and the expectations we're now up against. And here's the other truth that came through loud and clear. AI didn't create new problems for higher ed. It exposed the ones we've been avoiding. Students didn't suddenly wake up and start using AI. Websites didn't suddenly become invisible. Marketing didn't suddenly get more complex, and institutions didn't suddenly become under-resourced. AI just made all of that impossible to ignore. So in this mashup, you'll hear 5 distinct pressure points from across the industry, each describing what it's like to operate in a world where AI is a present reality. And we're starting where every shift starts, with the students themselves. Before institutions began drafting AI policies or experimenting with dynamic creative, students were out ahead, using AI constantly, trusting it selectively, and drawing lines around where they will and won't let institutions use it on them. In this first clip, Jeremy Tiers and Soup Campbell break down their survey of nearly 9,000 high school seniors and what Gen Z's contradictions around AI reveal about trust, expectations, and the widening gap between what students need and what institutions are delivering. Let's dive in. This survey that the two of you have deployed is so interesting, and I am so grateful that you are giving Higher Ed Pulse listeners this first look at the research. So friends, let's dive in. You are getting this exclusive look from more than 8,700 high school senior responses on how they feel about AI in the college search. And I think the goal is to get to over 10,000. So this is a really, this is not a small sample size here. Now, the headline and takeaway from my review. They're using AI all the time, but they don't trust it when colleges use it on them. So for example, 65% of respondents said they'd be less trusting of a school that used AI to review their admission application. But it's not because AI is scary, it's because it's inconsistent. And according to the survey, their top concerns are around inaccuracy and bias. So if that's your biggest fear, it makes total sense to me that you wouldn't want AI making admission or financial aid decisions for you. So in short, I don't think students are afraid of AI. I think they're afraid that AI will get things wrong. And so then it tracks that 9 out of 10 survey respondents said they'd rather communicate with a real person if given the choice. Gen Z might be comfortable using AI for information, but not for intimacy. They don't want a bot breaking down tuition options or navigating sensitive conversations. In my personal opinion, this data reveals a fascinating gap between behavior and belief. Here's the hidden insight. Students say they prefer real humans, but if they're waiting days for a reply or can't find clear information, I think they're going to go wherever they'll get the answers the fastest. Their expectations are rising even if trust hasn't caught up yet. And this brings me back to my conversation with Dr. Ed Cabellin on last week's episode of The Pulse. I think he said it perfectly, and the data this week proves it. Transparency matters. Students already assume you're using AI, so hiding it just erodes trust further. So, how should enrollment and marketing leaders make sense of all of this information? And what can we actually do with the data, especially when it challenges what we think students want? And that is exactly where Jeremy and Soup come in. So, okay, guys, we're going to start here. From your perspective, what was the biggest surprise in the survey results? And what stood out to you as maybe a potential blind spot for institutions? Soup, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of things in there that surprised me. I think I went into this with a lot of assumptions, right? Like that we can often do. And so I think one of the great things about us over at Zemi is we do have like millions of these students like right here in our, so we could just ask. So like I was like, I just want to ask these students. Like I don't want to assume any more of what I think. And so a lot of the responses really shocked me. I mean, I just picked one out. Well, there's two. I'll give you two quickly. One of the open-ended. So we did ask a question like that allowed them to do open-ended responses. One of the things that overwhelmingly I saw many of them mention was the environmental impact. I didn't even know that. Like, I didn't even understand that. Like, so that was something that I started to do more research in, and these big, massive data centers that exist to have to process all of these calls. And so that was interesting to me. But more on the topic of the questions that we asked them, I think there was one question around, like, if you had to schedule a call with a college or university, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to conduct that with a real person, talking to someone there that's real? Or would you prefer to kind of conduct that call with kind of the AI persona agent type thing? And that one was like 95% are saying we still want to talk to a real person if we've got to make that call. So like that was something that shocked me that I just thought was, I just assumed it would be much more balanced, like that they would be fine talking to any type of persona that would give them the information that they needed. So that was one that really stood out and caught my attention.
I am excited to dig more into the talk to a human versus AI with the two of you in a few minutes. But on your point about the environmental impact, I was just at dinner last night and we were talking about how I think Sam Altman recently came out, or somebody, maybe it wasn't ChatGPT, but somebody recently came out and was like, stop being polite to AI because of the environmental impact. Every time you end that response like with an extra thank you response, it takes more processing power for the AI to reply. And it was like, if you could just cut out the thank you, the lone thank you, it would have like an immediate environmental positive impact. I thought that was really, really funny. All right, Jeremy, what was surprising to you in this data?
So for me, Mallory, it was seeing that 86% of seniors say that they're convinced some or in some cases all of the emails and text messages they're getting from colleges and universities are being generated by AI. And what the three of us and many of the listeners know is the reality is very few admissions and enrollment marketing teams are actually using AI to, be a content tool or a writing tool. And so students are basically telling us, boy, these emails feel so robotic and so formal and impersonal that God, this must have been done by AI. And so a human would definitely do a better job than this. And to me, this hopefully will be, in some cases, the tipping point for all these conversations we've had around personalization and being conversational and just talking like a normal human. Because again, they think it's being written by AI. No, it's actually being written by humans. And if they're telling us it's not very good and it's this, I really hope that's going to be a wake-up call, Mallory, to a lot of these people that say, we've got to then figure out, and it's not hard because all the data's out there, how to get past this fear that so many writers, enrollment marketers, and admissions counselors tell me, where they're like, God, I don't want to sound like I'm just having a conversation with them and sound like I'm too relaxed because that makes me unprofessional. And I'm like, no. It does the exact opposite. It makes you relatable and believable, which is exactly what your target audience needs from you.
If students are already relying on AI for answers, the real question becomes, what answers are they getting about you? In this next clip, Jason Smith from OHA walks through how student search behavior has evolved, why fewer and fewer students are landing on your website at all, and what AI is doing with the content it can find about your institution. Here's Jason.
One of the bigger shifts we're seeing is this kind of move towards like what students, for undergraduate, which is mostly what we were looking at here, what was the driving reason when we first started doing websites 15, 20 years ago? It was like, I want to know what it feels like. They were looking to say, come to the website, give me a sense of what the school feels like. I think the bigger shift is that we're seeing more people go to social media and then also to online discussion boards. And I think that represents some of that feeling a little bit of, I want a more authentic experience. I want to understand the unvarnished portion. Like when students said, like, I know that you're going to show me the nicest building at campus. I don't need to see that. Like, I want to see what it's really like. And so I think, those top 5 things are pretty stable, with social media and online discussion boards kind of bubbling up a little bit higher. I think maybe the second way of looking at it is like, I think that AI is really a continuation of what we called sort of this like zero-click search, which is an idea from SEO that as Google built out more stuff around search results, like knowledge panels and the teasers, and the people also ask questions, that people were not clicking. So they would search, but they would not click. And so we call that a zero-click search. And it was somewhere, people debating, 40 to 60% of search traffic just doesn't ever make it to the site. So at one level, like, we've had this problem for a long time already, right? Like that's been around for 5 or 10 years already. So I think AI is just a continuation of this problem. Like suddenly we're in this world where like the website, the link might not even be there, right? We're just getting information. And so in both cases, your website is still the authoritative source of that information. It's just not the destination that people are going to. And I think this is a continuing trend. So it's interesting to have these kind of two tensions where some stuff is moving very slowly and not changing, frankly, that much. And the other is we're seeing a drive to social media and a drive to kind of more authentic channels. And then we're having this exasperation of the problem that we've always had, that people are not clicking through to our website from Google in general.
If Jason revealed the visibility gap, Mike Bell from Everspring reveals the consequence of it. Students are treating AI like a trusted advisor, and most institutions aren't even aware of the conversations happening. In this next clip, Mike walks through the data, the speed of adoption, and why being invisible at the point of decision is now the real risk. Let's listen. I recently interviewed Jason Smith from OHO and Sarah Russell from Eddy on this very topic. AI isn't just influencing discovery, it's filtering it, and your report drives that home. Again, 45% of students are using these tools, but only 13% are fact-checking them. So I gotta ask, Mike, in your opinion, are colleges already losing the visibility game? And what is at stake if colleges and universities do not course correct quickly?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you touched on a lot of the components of it. So I don't think it's over yet. The game's not over yet. I think if you think of the advent of any new channel, if you want to call it that, and I actually wouldn't even call this a channel. We'll talk about that more. I think it's more of a conversation. But, it's sort of like when the internet came along, when you had paid search or paid social, it didn't kill TV or radio. It dramatically shifted the high intent audiences and the media spend. And so you're seeing that happen now. It's not over yet, but it's moving quickly. And like you touched on, it's happening. The stats are showing it's happening in an incredible clip. Like we looked at this 2 years ago. Initially, we're like, this is interesting. This is showing up as a referral source. But the speed with which it has come in and grabbed share is staggering. I've never seen it in my entire marketing career. Nothing like it, right? So I think it's important, and it's getting to the point where it's critical. I think the thing that's sort of affecting universities in particular in terms of the visibility game is what you just touched on in terms of how much it's going out there and grabbing and where it's grabbing it from. AI favors things like clarity and structure and semantic relevance. And a lot of .edus kind of fall short on that for a lot of different reasons. One is budget. Two is that they don't really have sort of a centralized sort of structure. There's a lot of colleges doing their own thing, whether it be paid media or content strategy. And without a unified signal or optimized structure, you can risk either being represented or being excluded altogether. And this isn't a risk of sort of not showing up in a rankings like it used to be. It's being invisible at the point of decision. And that's where I would define this different than a channel. but rather almost a discussion that is happening sort of out of your visibility.
It's a direct quote from your report that I pulled. You wrote, ranking isn't enough and ads won't buy you visibility anymore. And I think that gets at the heart of it because like you just said, when the student is at the point of decision making, or even step it back maybe 12 months, at the point where they're building their consideration set, your institution might not even get on the consideration set if you're being either misrepresented or excluded in the AI returns.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What's really interesting is when we first started looking at this, we were seeing a shift in student behavior in general, like where you were seeing, and I don't know, this is dating me a little bit, but there was no such thing as a consideration set when I was looking at going to school, right? It was, I want to get into this school. I will pay whatever they tell me to pay. I will take it in the modality they tell me to pay. I will show up to class at the time they tell me to show up, right? Students now, for a variety of reasons we won't have time to cover in the podcast, have shifted their behavior where they're more picky, right? They are building in considerations. They're like, I want it hybrid, or I want it online. I want it to be under this. I want it to be completed within 12 months. I want it to be under this price point. And then they build out a consideration set. And we're seeing this in traditional search where we're seeing non-branded keywords outrank branded keywords, which is a shift that shows that they're building pick lists. They're building consideration sets, like we said. Now you show that and AI shows up at the same time and you're adding gas to that fire, right? So that is happening, but it's not just happening. It's happening, like you just alluded to, at the zero-click position, right? So it used to be that you made the decision point on the website, and then it was maybe in organic search. Then it was maybe in social media. So it's always been moving up the funnel, but it's now at a zero-click level. So to your point, it's completely invisible to you. So if you're really paying a lot of attention to curating something outside of AI, you're missing the conversation, quite frankly, literally, you know?
So along these lines, you have data in your report that does prove that students aren't just asking AI for facts. They are asking for recommendations. And as a marketer, that's hard to hear. Like, we've spent decades trying to build brand trust through things like rankings and our marketing campaigns. But now students just fully outsource their trust to ChatGPT. So if that's becoming the guide, what does that mean for our schools in terms of brand preference, even reputational risk? And do the institutions in this future state even have the ability to shape perception anymore?
Probably the $1 million question, right? The short answer is we don't totally know. None of us totally know. But where I think it is heading, and if you look at this, I will try not to go down the rabbit hole too far on this, but I think this is the gist. This is the crux of the issue with AI's introduction. This has been happening, I think, for a while, right? So you've got paid search results, and then like the latest sort of iteration, I'll call this, is influencers, right? That's something where you've got a brand's reputation in the hands of a third party. This isn't much different than that. It's just the next evolution of that in my mind. So what I think is going on with AI is it's not just retrieving results like a search engine would. It is assembling a narrative, right? So it's acting like an agent, and it's interpreting your brand from the content you provide, reviews on, like you just said, Reddit, third-party signals, your web structure. So it's going out there and putting a lot of stuff to there. So those are the things you need to have in mind when you're curating your brand. Is you have to make sure that it is indexable, it's publicly visible, that it's curated, it's consistent. You're making sure that all the web presence that touches on your brand lines up to the same narrative. There's no gaps in it that it's going to infer or deduce or fill in the blanks on. I think those are the kind of signals on there. The other thing that's sort of interesting is this is sort of the biggest departure is that it used to be there was the technical component where you had to make sure the signals were right from an SEO standpoint. And then you got them to the website, and then you had to have the human component to make sure you had a compelling argument. That is all kind of collapsed together now. It's one component. You have to have the technical signals. You know, you're almost equipping this agent to advocate on your behalf to the brand is how to think of it, right? Which is crazy, right? But if you think of it that way, that's the right lens to look at it that way. So you're almost you're not doing technical and then the sort of psychological, I guess you call it. You're doing it all in one. You're making sure the technical signals are there. It's publicly available. It's indexable, and that it's building a compelling narrative about your brand and why you should be there, addressing those sort of high intent questions, et cetera.
Mike made it clear that AI is already influencing which schools students consider. Marina Cooper from Johns Hopkins University picks up the thread from the marketer's side, where AI-driven creative is rewriting ads in real time and sometimes outpacing human judgment. She digs into what this means for brand safety, storytelling, and the level of control institutions need to hold on to as platforms automate more of the work. Here's Marina. Marina, I have to imagine, as a brand leader, the question you might be sitting here wondering is, well, what does my campaign strategy actually look like when I totally give up control of steering the ship? Now, we know from this investor call that Zuckerberg is very bullish on AI's potential to improve advertising in general. And, Meta's not the only one increasingly pitching full automation. Google is too. So, right? If all you need is an objective and a budget, Marina, what's your reaction to hearing that as a brand leader?
At first I want to get concerned, right? Because I want to think, well, where is the strategy in this? And where are we actually using all the data that we learn about our audiences to really pay attention to that nuance and be as specific as possible? But then I get more curious than I get concerned. And I think, you know what, maybe let me zoom out a bit. Maybe I'm not the target audience, and maybe he's really trying to get at entrepreneurs and, those independent consultants, those founders, those startups who really do rely heavily on social platforms to automate their marketing experiences because they don't have teams, because they don't have a CMO, and they have a direct community in a way that they need to be more dynamic in this way, and so they need that full automation. So I'm less concerned because I think, okay, he's got the masses to appeal to make marketing much more accessible in ways that a talented team embedded in an institution like mine can do on a regular basis. At the same time, my team's got to get smarter and learn how to run alongside, right, of these skills and all of these tools that are now available to us. Do we want to do full automation? No, because in many ways that feels like broad strokes. And like institutions like mine and higher ed institutions, we're talking to a lot of different audiences at any given time, and we're pay attention to that. Whether you're a teenager considering, our institution, in terms of admissions for the first time, or you're thinking about us in estate planning, as an alum or donor, we have a whole gamut of strategies that we're thinking about, and obviously a host of different campaigns that we're running at any given time. And so in many ways, this automation is intriguing, but we have to pay attention to our audiences who are much more sophisticated than ever about how we're communicating to them and using these tools.
Yeah. JHU is a high-profile and mission-driven institution. And I think a major risk with dynamic creative being AI optimized is over-optimization and brand misalignment, which has much more significant challenges for that high-profile brand like JHU versus, like you referenced, maybe that entrepreneur who's just getting started or testing the waters. So, AI is optimizing for things like click-throughs and conversions, not necessarily narrative or tone. And that's where that brand misalignment can come into play. I think it can also favor some short-term performance over that long-term brand integrity. So, Marina, as brand safety guardrails are likely very top of mind for you, given your role, where's your thinking on all of this right now?
Yeah, my thinking is real-time changes sound really scary, because we need that real-time temperature and tone check, right? In terms of the climate that we're in, maybe the thing that just happened at our institution a few hours ago or just yesterday. And we as human beings can make those real-time adjustments because we know what's going on. And sometimes those algorithms don't work in our favor. And so that additional review and decision-making is really important and important before we publish.
Marina tackled the marketing implications. Now, in this final clip, John Carrere from Pitt Community College takes us to the policy level. He talks about the federal push for AI in education, the gaps it exposes in staffing, training, and funding, and what it actually looks like to implement AI when you're already stretched thin. Let's listen. Students, as even high schoolers, can graduate job ready for these AI adjacent fields. But then the problem is, though, there's no funding to back any of this up. So the executive order talks a really big game. But I think if you're one of the critics, right, it's an unfunded mandate. So asking K through 12, let alone colleges, to do more with the budgets that we already know are shrinking? Like, will there actually be any outcomes, or is this just like pie in the sky? Like, we're going to close our eyes and, if we wish it, it'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point, Mallory. And literally before I got on the podcast today, as we're out navigating our technology and trying to get into the podcast room, the National Education Association reported that North Carolina, where we operate, had dropped from 38th to 43 in teacher pay averages. And that's an embarrassment for the state of North Carolina, I feel like, because, this has been a source of contention for many, many years. But anybody listening to the podcast, wherever they are here in this world, I believe that higher education professionals have been doing more with less for a really long time. So it doesn't come as a complete shock to me that the executive order does not unlock specific funding to grow AI in the classroom. But I do feel like, especially for higher education students, there are going to be gaps that they have to address. And I think probably one of the biggest ones is directly addressed in that executive order is how are instructors utilizing and enhancing the delivery of AI in the classroom. We all know that we're all using it, but there's no consensus. There's no unified means of being able to deliver on what that means for the student experience. So I feel like if we're utilizing AI, it has to be done effectively. It has to be done morally. And with the number of AI options growing, I think that we all want to ensure that our faculty are trained in how to utilize the solutions as most effectively as possible, especially when it comes to the student experience as a whole.
Yeah.
But I also think, in the classroom for students and as they learn, we know that they're utilizing AI when they're completing their homework, when they're delivering on their assignments. We need to be able to utilize AI effectively on their side as well, and making sure that we're upholding the academic integrity of our institutions.
So how do you prepare your team and the faculty at a real school like Pitt to work along these AI tools and these initiatives? Like, where is the energy? Where's the resistance?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of guarded optimism around the use of AI tools because I think we all know, as I mentioned, we're all using it. But having a team of AI agents to assist us with our prospective students and speaking with them about frequently asked questions as they navigate and investigate what PCC has to offer, it seems to have decreased our phone traffic, which of course our frontline professionals really appreciate because those AI agents appear to be delivering what the students are looking for. But I also believe that energy around AI exploration on our campus seems to be focused more on developing a more efficient way to achieve our menial responsibilities within our roles. But I feel like it's really important for us as a community college to keep an open door, that we keep the human element when it comes to engaging with our prospective students and our current learners as well.
So when you put all of these conversations side by side, a pretty clear picture emerges. Students didn't wait for higher ed to get comfortable with AI. They just started using it. Search didn't break overnight. It just evolved faster than our websites. Marketing didn't lose control, but it ran into guardrails we never built. And policy didn't create new pressures. It amplified the ones we've been managing for years. 2025 was the year AI stopped being a future topic and became operating reality for students, marketers, and our campuses. And through every clip today, the same message kept surfacing. AI didn't create our biggest problems, it exposed them. The trust gaps, visibility gaps, governance gaps, resourcing gaps, all those, we'll get to it later gaps. There is good news. Once a problem is visible, it becomes solvable. And the institutions that make peace with this new landscape, the ones who are willing to update content, sharpen their governance, and train their teams, those are the schools that will actually benefit from the shift instead of being blindsided by it. Friends, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing these episodes with your teams, and thank you for being part of a community that's willing to have honest conversations. Enrollify will be back in the new year with more insights, more research, and more higher ed pulse. Until then, take care, take a breath, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.